So, welcome to all viewers to unit number 2, types of hydro power plants. In my previous lecture, I have explained you the basics of hydroelectric power generation, in which we have gone through the basic details of the individual components of hydroelectric power plant. We have seen turbine, then we have seen penstock, then we have seen the different types of hydroelectric power generation. In this lecture, in this module, we are going to discuss the types of hydro power plant that we normally encounter in hydroelectric power generation. Now, the capacity, unit and selection of equipments, their characteristics and specification for design of hydropower station depends upon the type of hydroelectric development and classification with respect to head and size. There are three main types of hydropower schemes that can be categorized in terms of how the flow at a given site is controlled or modified. Those can be explained as: number 1, you can say the runoff river plants, no active storage, it is also sometimes referred as. Number 2, you can call it as plants with significant storage, and number 3, you can call it as pumped storage. We will slowly go through one by one, and in the PPT in which I will share you, in that I will clearly show you with the help of a diagram all these three types of schemes. In that you can find out the differences between all the three schemes of power generation. Now, we will see it in one by one. First of all, we will see in a runoff river project. This type of project is a natural project in which the natural flow of river is relatively uncontrolled. It means we are taking water directly from the flowing river. So, there is very difficult chances for us or for any human being to control the flow of naturally flowing water. Next comes in a storage projects, the filling and emptying of the impounded storage along with the pattern of natural stream flow controls the flow in the river downstream from the storage impoundment. And finally, in the third, that is called runoff river plants, it can be located at the downstream end of a canal fall, open flume or pipeline diverting the stream's flow around a water supply dams or falls. The available flow governs the capacity of the plant. The plant has little or no ability to operate at higher flow rates than available at the moment. In a conventional plant or a dam which stores water in a reservoir or lake, impoundment controls the river flows. The water is released according to electric irrigation, water supply or flood control needs. Constructing a dam and storage reservoir can increase the percentage of time that a project can produce a given level of power. Base load plants, those operated at relatively constant outputs, may have either a small capacity relative to the river flow or may have a significant storage reservoir. Storage reservoirs can again be sized for storing water during wet years or wet seasons. Alternatively, they can be sized to provide water for weekly or daily peak generation. All these depends upon demand and supply. A storage reservoir also allows using available energy that might otherwise be wasted as a spill. Then plants with storage at both head and tail race are called pumped storage project. So, this is all about the pumped storage project. Now, we will see some basics of storage schemes. In such type of power generation, in such schemes, annual yield from the catchment is stored in fully or partially and then released according to some plan for utilization of storage. Storage again may be for single purpose such as power development or may be for multiple purpose use, which may include irrigation, flood control, then sustenance of aquatic life, etc. Therefore, the design of storage, works and releases from the reservoir will be governed by the intended use of the stored water, because water stored in a dam can be used for a multiple purpose. It is not that if we have stored water in a dam or in a reservoir, that will only be used for power generation. If water is there available with high head, it can be used for multiple schemes as discussed by me in my previous lecture, and I will also be discussing on the further uses of this water in my upcoming sessions. If the scheme is only for power development, then the best use of the water will be releasing according to the power demand. Schemes with limited storage may be designed as peaking units. If the water projects forms a part of the large grid, then the storage is utilized for meeting the peak demands. Such stations could be usefully assigned with the duty of frequency regulations of the system. Now, let us all understand the basic principle, the basic working of pump storage scheme principle. So, the basic principle of pumped storage is to convert the surplus electrical energy available in a system in off peak periods to hydraulic or potential energy in order to generate power in periods when the peak demand on the system exceeds the total available capacity of generating stations. What I am trying to convey here is, when your power generation is higher and the demand is not more, I mean to say that if the generation is more, the demand is less, in that situation such type of scheme will be used, because when the demand will be peak, you have to ensure it by maximum generation, and that can be generated, that can be satisfied, that can be fulfilled using this type of scheme. By using the surplus scheme electrical energy available in the network during low demand periods, water is pumped from lower pond to an upper pond. In periods of peak demand, the power station is operated in the generating mode, that is, water from the upper pond is drawn through the same water conduit system to the turbine for generation of power. Now, again this type of storage can be subcategorized into two major categories. They are pumped storage plant and then mixed pump storage plant. Now, we will see these two in detail. Number 1, pumped storage plant. In this type, only pumped storage operation is envisaged without any scope for conventional generation of power. These are provided in places where the runoff is poor. Further, they are designed only for operation on a day-to-day basis without room for flexibility in operations. There are certain limitations, certain foundations associated with this kind of a scheme. Therefore, we go for a much practical, much utilized scheme called as mixed pump storage plants. In this type, in addition to the pumped storage scheme, some amount of extra energy can be generated by utilizing the additional natural runoff during a year. This can be designed for operation on weekly basis or other form of longer period by providing for additional storage and afford some amount of flexibility in operation. For example, this type of scheme can be used or can be controlled, can be regulated based upon demand supply basis. If the demand is more, we can use this mixed pump type storage for generating more electricity, more power, and if the demand is less, we can improvise in the system itself by reducing the quantity of water flow, by reducing the quantity of power generation. Now, before going further, before going into various types of hydro power plant in detail or various types of power generation in detail, I would like to give you the brief of classification of hydro power plants. As such, there are no hard and fast rules to classify hydro power plant, but still I have made some basic classification that will be discussed in my subsequent sessions. We can classify our hydro power plant based on its hydraulic characteristics, we can classify based on head, then based on capacity, then based on turbine characteristics, then based on load characteristics, then based on interconnection. So, these are some way, some method, some criteria of classifying the hydropower plant. Now, let us let us go through hydropower project based on hydraulic characteristics. From such point of view, we have segregated, or we can say we have separated hydraulic power plant into 4 different categories: runoff plant, that is called as diversion plant, then storage plant, that is called as impoundment plant, pumped storage plant, which we have just discussed few moments ago, and then tidal plant. I will give you in detail explanation for all these in my upcoming session, and in my presentation, in my slide which I will share with you all, you can see the diagrammatic representation of these as well. In some areas of the world, the flow, we are first discussing this runoff river plant, that is also called as diversion plant. In some areas of the world, the flow rate and elevation drops of the water are consistent enough that hydroelectric plants can be built directly in the river itself. As I have discussed in the first session, that is basics of hydropower generation, that if head is available at any place, we can directly install power station there itself. So, in such station where head is available, where head is consistent enough that hydroelectric plant can be built directly in the river itself. The plant is utilized as it comes in the river. Practically, water is not stored during flood period as well as during low electricity demand period. Hence, water is wasted, because here we have no control over the flow of water, because water is directly taken from its natural source. Runoff river plant may be with pondage or without pondage. The plants with pondage are provided with a barrage to store the water to take care of daily variations. Now, during good flow conditions, it can supply base load, and during low flow condition, it can supply peak load also. Runoff river facilities use low dams to provide limited storage of water at most daily pondage. In a runoff SHP means small hydropower scheme, through a diversion structure, water is diverted to a conductor system to the powerhouse. In that, we sometimes come across different types of power plant classification, that is called as canal based site, that I would also like to discuss it here itself. A canal based scheme utilizes the drops on existing or proposed irrigation canals. The energy generated by water flowing through the canal fall, either located in the canal or naturally existing, is tapped for power generation. And we all know that canal can be used for irrigation also, mainly canal is used for irrigation, but that can also be used for this power generation. Powerhouse is located at the main canal or at a bypass canal. It can be constructed where the powerhouse can be located. Now, we come across the second type of plant, that is called as storage plant, that is also called as impoundment plant. This is a very common type of hydropower plant. This plant has a storage reservoir provided by constructing a dam across the river. Like we have seen in the previous case, where we have not constructed a dam, we have utilized the naturally flowing water. Here we are constructing a dam across the river. It is generally preferred in mountainous regions. The storage of water takes care of fluctuations of water supply during flood and drought period as well during load fluctuation. Hence, it can supply electricity more constantly, or you can say more consistently than any other type of plant, because dam is a huge reservoir of water. We can use it in any way as per our requirement. This can be considered suitable for both base load as well as peak load. Other benefits of this type of plant are flood control, irrigation, drinking water, improved navigation, improved fish breeding, marine life, aquatic life, all these things. So, there are many other benefits also apart from generation of power of this type of power scheme. The dam provides the means to regulate the flow of the water, which can add to the height of the source of water, thereby effectively increasing the head. Reservoir created by the dam may store and regulate stream flow to make them more timely or power production and to serve other purposes of water resource development. Now, powerhouse is located at the toe of the dam, and it utilizes the discharge release through sluice primarily meant for irrigation, and the head available, head by head I mean difference between water level at upstream and downstream of the reservoir. So, head available for power generation. Now, in my upcoming slide I will be discussing in my upcoming presentation I will discuss about pump type storage plant. Water is utilized for generation of power during peak demand, while same water is pumped back in the reservoir during off peak demand period when excess power is available for this purpose. If the turbine we are using is reversible, it can be used as a pump also to supply water back to the reservoir. Otherwise, a separate pump can also be used. Based on operating cycle, it can be classified as plant with daily cycle and plant with weekly cycle. Plant with a daily cycle, this type of plant, water is pumped up from midnight to early morning as well as up to near afternoon time. Then next type, plant with weekly cycle, in which water will be pumped only once in a weekend, during a weekend. Now, pumped storage plants are employed at places where the quantity of water available for power generation is inadequate. First of all, because that is why we have to go for the construction of separate dam. Here the water passing through the turbine is stored in a tail race pond. During load period, this water is pumped back to the head reservoir using the extra energy available. And if our turbine, as I mentioned previously, that if the turbine being used is reversible, this turbine can be used to pump back the water to its initial source. This water be again used for generating power during peak load periods. Pumping of water may be done seasonally or daily depending upon the condition of the site and the nature of the load on the plant. So, having gone through these three types of plant, our fourth what I am going to discuss in this session is tidal plant. This type of plant has been recently developed in the last 20-30 years, where the tidal energy stored in the sea water is used to operate a turbine and then further produce power. In India, we have seen very limited generation using this tidal plant, but in western countries, most of the places this energy is being used more for generating this power. So, tide, as I told, tidal energy will be used for power generation. Tide is a periodic rise and fall of water level of the sea due to gravitational pull, gravitational force of attraction between moon and earth, and then sun and the earth. Region which comes near to the moon are subjected to high tide, and region which are away from the moon are subjected to low tide. The level difference between high tide and low tide is called range of tide, which is responsible for this power generation. Although not yet widely used, as I told, we have not utilized the full potential of this type of power generation. Tidal energy has the potential for future electricity generation. Tides are more predictable than wind and sun, and in my presentation which I will share with you, I have shown with the help of a diagrammatic representation the tidal power plant. Among sources of renewable energy, tidal energy has traditionally suffered from relatively high cost and limited availability of sites which is sufficiently high tidal ranges or flow velocities, thus constricting its total availability. One drawback associated with this type of power generation is the initial investment for constructing tidal power plant is very high. That is why normal people or even some small companies do not go for such type of power generation, because the huge capital is required. Tidal power is the only technology that draws on energy inherent in the orbital characteristics of earth and moon system, and not to a lesser extent as in earth sun system. Other natural energies exploited by human technology originate directly or indirectly from the sun, including fossil fuel, conventional hydroelectric, wind, biofuel, wave and solar energy. Now, I am going to classify hydro power project based on head. So, based on operating head, power plant, hydroelectric power plant can be classified into three categories: low head plant up to 30 meter capacity, medium head plant between 30 to 300 meter capacity, and high head plant which are having more than 300 meter head capacity. Now, again I have classified hydro project based on turbine characteristics, that is specific speed, types of turbine based on specific speed. Number 1, you can say low specific speed between 10 to 60, then medium specific heat we have 60 to 300, and then high specific speed we have 300 to 1000. By the way, I am talking about this specific speed, I would like to define here. Specific speed is the speed of a turbine which is similar to the actual turbine, but of such a size that will develop unit power when working under unit head. Now, I will discuss briefly the hydro project based on load characteristics. First one, we will go through it point by point. First one, let us go through base load plant. It operates continuously and generate constant power throughout the year. The examples for this type of plant can be considered as storage plant, then runoff river plant without storage. Now, peak load plant which supply the power during the peak hours only, example pumped storage, runoff river with pondage. All these schemes has already been discussed in detail in my previous discussion. Now, based on interconnection, first one we can consider isolated plants. If a power station works independently it is referred as an isolated plant. It is generally installed in industry, in captive power plants, and then next we have interconnected plants. If a power station is directly connected with grid, it means the power generated in the plant is directly supplied to the grid and then to the end users. That type of plant will be called as interconnected plant. Now, before going into detail of further classification, I would like to discuss something about planning and master plan for a systematic development of hydropower, time bound, duly shared between government, social and private sectors. Master plans are required. So, let us go through various factors that need to be considered before setting up of this type of plant. Number first, it is an inventory of all possible sites. I am talking about the master plan. It provides the priority or ranking for speedy development. It provides cluster approach. It provides financial requirements. It provides grid network strengthening. Then in master plan, we will also have to include the assessment of SHP, small hydro plant, potential of existing irrigation dams and canals, then assessment of potential as runoff river schemes, then assessment of potential sites for rural electrification, then compilation of above mentioned activities with prioritization of identified SHP sites. So, all this can be covered, can be included if our master plan is ready for setup of a new plan. Now, source of information for master plan. Here I have included some sources, some agencies, you can say some government organization, some educational institutes, some data centers from which you can refer, which will have some data related to the preparation of master plan, which gives us all the criteria required for constructing a hydroelectric power plant. So, I have included both state as well as central authority here. Few things I will list it out here. State nodal agencies for renewable energy in states, state electricity boards, Department of Power of states, then central government agencies such as MNES, MNRE, CEA, CWC, NHPC, etc. Then individual having background in such data calculations, then Survey of India including Digital Mapping Center, then Forest Survey of India, Dehradun, then Indian Institute of Remote Sensing, Dehradun, then Regional Center of Remote Sensing, Dehradun, then we have NATMO, Calcutta. Now, in my slide which I will share with you, I will share one various government, or you can say the various permissions, various laws, various factors that government has laid to the public or group of public, individual, company, whatever you can say, what has to be followed before starting the construction of a power plant. That I will share you in the presentation, which you will eventually get. The government hydropower policies. Government of India policy on hydropower development announced by Ministry of Power, Government of India. Why there is need for a hydel policy? Why separate policy is required? I will first discuss this and then we will take it further. Hydropower is a renewable, economic, non-polluting and environmentally benign source of energy. Hydropower stations have inherent ability for instantaneous starting, stopping, load variation, etc., and help in improving reliable power system. Hydro stations are the best choice for meeting the peak demand, and the generation cost is not only inflation free, but it also reduces with the demand. For example, if we have more demand, if we have to develop more power, the cost of generation will reduce. And one factor that completely separates this type of power generation from the other power generation is that it is multi-purpose project. I mean to say here that all the other plants which you start, which we set up for power generation, only produces power, but for this type of power generation, it not only serves for power generation, but it serves many other functions which I have discussed earlier. Now, they also help in opening of avenues for development of remote and backward areas. Our country is endowed with enormous economically exploitable and viable hydro potential, assessed to be about the here I will say I am trying to give the estimate of the available hydro capacity of India. In India, we have about 84,000 megawatt power generating capacity at 60% load factor. In addition, some 6,781 megawatt in terms of small capacity from small, mini and micro hydel schemes have been assessed. Also, 56 sites for pump storage schemes with an average aggregate installed capacity of 94,000 megawatt have been identified. However, only 15% of the hydroelectric potential has been harnessed so far and 7% is under various stages of development. Thus, 78% of the potential remains without any plans for exploration. Despite hydroelectric projects being recognized as the most economic and preferred source of electricity, share of hydropower has been declining steadily since 1963. Means since a long time we have not been able to increase the share of this hydropower generation in total India's generation of power. The share of power has been continuously declining in the last 3 decades. One small fact I will tell here, the hydro share has declined from 44% in 1970 to 25% in 1998. It means in this 20 years slab itself, 28 years, we have gone through a decline of 15%. And the ideal scenario, the ideal hydrothermal mix should be in the ratio of 40 to 60. It means if 40 is hydro, if 60 is steam, then 40 should be hydro. Because of an imbalance in the hydel thermal mix, especially in eastern and western regions, many thermal power stations are required to back down during peak of hours. The capacity of thermal plants cannot be fully utilized, resulting in a loss of about 4 to 5% in plant load factor. Even if the share of hydropower is to be maintained as the existing level of 25%, the capacity addition during the 9th and 10th plan would work out to be 23,000 megawatt, and if the share were to be enhanced to 30%, it would require a further addition of 10,000 megawatt of hydro capacity. By this data, by this information, I am just trying to establish a point that if we want to maintain the appropriate thermal hydro share ratio, then we have to buckle up and we have to give more focus on this hydropower generation. Now, what is the government's objective behind all these steps? I would like to lay it here. Ensuring targeted capacity addition during last 5 years, then exploitation of vast hydroelectric potential at a faster pace, then promoting your small and mini hydel projects, then strengthening the role of PSUs, SEBs, state electricity boards for taking up new hydel projects, improving private investment, improving FDIs in power sectors. Now, what are the various environmental issues that has to be considered in a hydro projects? Number 1, relocation of people, community. Number 2, deforestation. Number 3, submergence. Number 4, quality of water. Number 5, flood mitigation. Number 6, aquatic life. Number 7, it destroys forest and wildlife habitat, agricultural land and scenic land. Now, by these factors, what I am trying to convey is, it is not only good or win-win situation in setting up of hydropower projects. You have to see, you have to consider the various drawbacks associated with it as well. So, now let us see the statement showing approval and SWOT, that is strength, weakness, opportunity and threatening of a hydro project. Number 1, we will discuss about strengths. It is environmentally friendly, clean, renewable source of energy. It has high degree of flexibility. It is a part of multi-purpose project with additional benefits, as I have told many times in my discussion that it is not only meant for power generation, some other advantages can also be served from this. Then pumped storage for optimal integrate operation of grid, then least operational and maintenance cost, then additional benefit of flood control, tourism, fishery, then well recognized for obtaining financial support. Then some certain weaknesses are also associated with this hydro power plant. Some of them I will discuss it here. It mainly depends upon rainfall or snow melt, because we need water for working of hydro project. If water is not there, nothing will happen. So, we are dependent on water, and for water we are dependent upon rainfall or snow melt. Runoff river not for peaking time, then high capital intensive, then remotely located, then gestation period is very large, relatively smaller units and non-standard occurrence. So basically what I am trying to convey here, the main drawback associated is initial cost very high. It means normal people or a group of people as an individual cannot go for such type of power generation. We have to include government or big players to go for this power generation. But one very important advantage of this hydro power is the cost of generation increases with the demand. This is also one point that separates it from other sources of power generation, because other sources, if you need more power, you have to spend more money, you have to burn more coal, or you have to spend more energy in other forms. But here, as the demand increases, the cost of production will decrease. So this is what separates it, this form of power generation, from the other. So some opportunities associated with this type of generation is vast potential is still untapped. As I told, very small percentage has still been utilized, and very much extra percentage of sources are there which is still not unexplored. Requirement for power peaking, then greater concern toward increasing pollution on land, water and in air causes leading inclination towards hydro, then depleting of fossil fuel. So these are some drawbacks. Now threats associated with setting up of hydro project, ambitious plan for thermal nuclear program for power, then growing concern of environment, then prone to natural calamities, submergence of land, displacement of population, apprehension on seismic disturbances, overemphasis on other renewable energy development. So everything has some good or bad, some advantages, disadvantages. Likewise here also in hydropower plant we have some advantages, we have some disadvantages, and the most important disadvantage is sometime what happens is we are going for setting up of dam in an area where some massive population is there. So that sometime happens that that population, that entire city or that entire group of people have to move from one place to the other. So this is one very big you can say drawback associated with setting up of this hydroelectric project, because if the geographical ecological condition demands of setting up of power plant at some desired place, we have to go through with this. So this is all about our discussion in this session. In this session we have discussed the different types of hydro plant and then various other factors associated with it, government initiative in this area, the factors involved and the areas explored, unexplored. So this is it for this section. In my upcoming sessions we will discuss some more about this hydroelectric power generation. So thank you for your time. Thank you.